watching Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Just over 10 years ago now, the SEC charged Texan Alan Stanford for fraud and securities law violations for running a massive Ponzi scheme that cheated investors out of some $7 billion. Stanford is now serving a term of 110 years in prison. But so far, less than $600 million of the lost investments have been recouped. Many of the investors waiting for their savings come from the state of Louisiana, which has led Republican Senator John Kennedy to take up their cause. Welcome, Senator Kennedy, now back to the program, joining us today from Capitol Hill. So, Senator, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, David.
In reading up on this, I knew about the Stanford fraud, but what I didn't realize is the sharp disparity between the percentage that's been recouped from the Madoff victims, Bernie Madoff's victims, and the Stanford victims. Why is that?
Well, we're trying to find out, David. I mean, this is a very sad situation. What Stanford did is unconscionable. He's in prison. He's got a 110-year sentence to serve. He deserves every year of it. But a receiver's been appointed. The receiver's been trying to recover the money. I think so far the receiver's recovered out of the $7 billion, $500 million, $600 million. Of course, the problem is half of it went to fees. And these are not wealthy people who were victimized here. I mean, I'm not excusing what happened in the Madoff Ponzi scheme, but these are not wealthy people. These are just average Louisianians. I had hoped that the SIPC, the Securities Investor Protection Corporation, was going to cover these losses, but the SIPC takes the position this was a foreign bank. It was. And that these were not securities, they were certificates of deposit. Now, SocGen has about, I forget how much they have, $500 million, $210 million.
Yeah, $200 million they got, a chunk of it.
Yeah, SocGen's got $210 million. There's been a final judgment that they need to return that money. It was money that belonged to Stanford. Right. We're trying to get them to release it.
And in fact, I've got your letter here with Senator Cassidy. You've written a joint letter to Societe Generale. And in part, you say, let us be very clear, this is not your money. It belongs to American citizens who have been victimized by SIB, that's the Stanford organization, with your complicity. Refusing to return their money has prolonged their suffering, and it is unacceptable. It does seem unacceptable. Why are they doing that? What is their excuse?
Well, they've got a lot of legal excuses. I met with Jay Clayton, who is our SEC chairman, doing a great job yesterday, in fact, about this issue. He's going to be in Louisiana over the next couple of months. We're going to set a meeting with him and the lawyers who are helping my people in Louisiana and many of those who were victimized by Stanford. And we're going to talk about this. Senator Cassidy and I are just going to keep pounding them. We're going to chase the bank like a hound from hell until we get this $210 million. They owe it. They need to pay it.
Is there any legislation that could help this, or is this more sort of your bully pulpit, which is substantial, whether it's talking with the SEC or with Societe Generale?
Well, we could try legislation. You know, you run into the problem of you're directing a foreign corporation to pay money, even though there's a final judgment. The lawyers seem to think that the shorter way home is to just keep pounding on the bank until they do it. But, you know, I'm going to talk further with the lawyers in Louisiana. I want to help my people. I mean, this is the 10th anniversary. Yes, it was $7 billion, for God's sakes. Yes, the receivers recovered $500 or $600 million, but half of it went to the lawyers. Yeah. And went in fees. And you know, I just, this is unconscionable.
Well, you're on the case, no doubt about it. Let me ask you just another couple questions here. One is the debt ceiling. Tomorrow, the debt ceiling kicks back in. And I talked to actually one of your colleagues, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, earlier this week, and he said, look, David, we never do anything until we absolutely have to, but you all should just be relaxed because we always come through in the end. Why don't we just raise the debt ceiling? Because if we're going to do it eventually, why don't we just get it done and we don't cause a lot of turmoil in the marketplace?
Well, we need to raise the debt ceiling. I get that. We need to pay our debts. But we also need to have an adult discussion about why we're here, for God's sakes. I mean, everybody up here, including Republicans that I talk to, say, yeah, we got too much debt. We're spending too much money. We need to do something about it. And I say, okay, well, let's do something about it. And all you hear is crickets. It's like, you know, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody's quite ready to make the trip. That's how it is up here in terms of our debt and the spending. I was looking at a CBO report the other day on discretionary spending. They're predicting over the next 10 years it'll increase about 3% a year. They're predicting on mandatory spending with interest about 10% a year. Now, by, I think, 2023, we're going to be spending more on interest, not principal and interest on our debt than we're spending on defense. You know, I mean, everybody compares us to spending like a drunk sailor. A drunk sailor stops when he runs out of money, man. They just keep going up here. And I offered an amendment in the Appropriations Committee. I sent on appropriations to say, hey, maybe this year we had a pay raise for our federal employees. I'm not saying they're not good people, but I offered an amendment to say, well, we can't afford it right now. Maybe we ought to postpone it. You would have thought I had cholera, man. These guys, I got 2 votes. There must be 35, 40 members of appropriations. All my friends, Democrats and Republicans, they put their head down. They voted against me. You know, America ought to pay its debts. But we also ought to talk about how we got here.
Yeah, no question about it. It certainly seems there's a lot of talk, not much action. Finally, let me talk to another place where money's being spent, this time by the President of the United States under an emergency order. That is the building of that wall down at the southern border. It now appears that there are some Republicans, some of your fellow Republicans like Lamar Alexander, who may be voting in favor of a rescission of that declaration of emergency. How do you stand on that? Are you concerned, quite apart from the border security issue, with the President taking it upon himself to decide to spend money without it being appropriated by the Congress?
Well, a couple of points. The President wouldn't have to do this if the United States Congress had done its job. The National Emergency Act and the statutes supporting it have been around a long time. Past presidents have used them, I think, in 60 different instances. The President's not using any power that Congress hasn't already given him. You know, it wasn't my preferred option, but I was afraid it was going to come to this. I'm going to vote to support him. Now, some of my colleagues on the Democratic side, all of my colleagues on the Democratic side will not, and some of my Republicans on the Democratic side will not. In fact, I think the President's going to lose on this vote, and he's going to have to veto the bill, and will sustain his veto. But it's not my preferred choice. But we do have a crisis at the border. We do need to do something about it. And Congress needs to help him, but Congress, for political reasons, chose not to.
We always appreciate you being with us. Very plain-spoken. Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana.
Thanks.
Great to have you here, sir.